guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Maya. Another year means another yearly reading wrap up. I'm gonna show you guys every single book I read in 2024, and just like last year I have borrowed my brother's chair because it's a lot more aesthetic looking than mine, even though you can barely see it on the screen, but it's also so comfy to sit on for these sort of videos, like so wide. Okay, anyways, so the first time I did a yearly reading wrap up I read 41 books, then the next year I read 50 books, and then last year I read 27-ish books, and this year I read the same amount as last year, around 27. And I'm saying around because there's like a couple books that I didn't finish, so I don't know if we should count them or not. And as for what genres I read a lot of my usual favorites, which is young adult, fantasy, romance, but I feel like this year I was more diverse. I expanded out of my comfort zone, dabbled in some other genres, like I read a few classic books, sprinkled in some non-fiction, and also a few middle grade novels. So I really enjoyed doing that. I love trying new genres, seeing what I like. But yeah, you guys have been waiting for this video. It's a little bit delayed. It's a few days after the new year already, so sorry about that, but it's here finally. I have my reading journal over here, and I log all of the books that I read last year into here, and I logged in 27 books. So we're gonna go through this so I can remember each book I read. I'm also gonna look at my Goodreads to see what I wrote in the review, and mostly just what I remember from my brain. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to books. Like, it can be a few years after reading it and I'll still remember it pretty well. I thought everyone was like this until my sister told me how she forgets books quite fast unless she read them really recently. So comment what type of reader you are. I know that a lot of people just remember it for the vibes, how they felt reading it, which I do remember it that way too, as well as what happens. Enough talking, let's get into this video, which is all about talking about books. First book I read in 2024 was The Night Circus. This book is a little slow paced, so it did take me quite a bit to get through it. I think like 2 or 3 months. It wasn't the only book I was reading during that time period. I was also like putting it down to read other books, but it was the first book that I started. This book was very cozy, immersive, and atmospheric, but as I said, it was a little slow paced, and at times it felt a little slow and dragging and made me put it down, but at other times it was just highly captivating, kept me turning the pages late into the night. Night Circus, yes, I did stay up a lot at night reading this, and I thought that everything was just so well developed. The characters, plot, story, magic system, everything, and there was just something so enchanting about reading this at night before bed. I feel like nighttime is the perfect time to read this, or dark winter days. In my reading journal, I mentioned my favorite chapter in this book was The Magician's Umbrella. It says, I read this chapter yesterday and it is one of my favorites. It's where Celia finds out who her opponent is. Because I'm not gonna go really deep into explaining what the books are about, but just how I felt about them. But basically they're playing this magical game which takes years, and their chessboard is this circus, their game arena. But I did think there were a few parts that I was a little bit unsettled by. It was a little bit too dark in some parts, and I also was not fond of her opponents. Marco, I didn't like his character. The total rating that I gave this was 3.75 stars. I think it was a great experience. The next book was The Tale of Emily Winsnap. This is my sister's book, and I was in the mood for something lighthearted, chill, middle grade, and this delivered on that. It was nothing special. I gave it like a 3.5 stars, but I guess that was pretty much what I expected from it, but it didn't make me interested enough to read the rest of the series, which my sister has. Next, I read Traitor to the Throne. You've probably already heard me raving about this book so much this year. This is the second book of the Rebel of the Sands trilogy, and the first book was good, but the end of it left me a little bit doubtful and uninterested. Like, I feel like she writes the endings of her books a little weakly, but when I started this one, it immediately grabbed my attention back into this world and series. The progression of the story and plot was really good, and it was really rare for me to find myself feeling bored. Also, the humor is even better than it was in the first book. I just laughed so much so far with the series. I still have the third book to go, and in my reading journal I also said that I love the characters and the new character in here, and my expectations have been pleasantly exceeded and raised for the third and final book. It will have to work to live up to this awesome second book. And I gave this a 4.75 stars instead of a 5 because I felt like the last 25% of the book was less interesting than the whole overall. But yeah, I feel like the series is definitely very underrated. It has the perfect fantasy feel to it. But if you're planning on reading it, I don't want to raise your hopes up too much. It's honestly better to go into a book when you're not expecting a lot, so lower those expectations and then go into it. Because I went into it not expecting anything from the series. So maybe that's the reason why I loved it so much. And also one of the strongest things about this book, I feel like, are the plot twists. The humor and the plot twists, there is just so much of both. Then I read This Time It's Real. This was my first Anne Liang book. It was very fun and chill and cute and relatable. I found myself really connecting to our main character. I laughed a lot, blushed a lot, and I feel like the emotions and feelings and vibes were captured very well in this book. In my reading journal, I said that I can easily relate to how she feels, her thoughts and words, and I haven't felt that way in a long time with a main character. I also almost never annotate books, but this book made me whip out my supplies. I felt like this book was executed very well. The pacing and the plot was very good throughout the book, and it was very funny humor. But at the end, I didn't feel fully satisfied. It felt like the story didn't end yet. Like it needed to keep going or something. Maybe that's just me really wanting a sequel for these characters, but I don't know, I didn't feel fully satisfied at the end. And I gave this a 4.5 stars. And next, I started Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I only read around 63 pages before I put it down to read other books, and then I picked it up again at the end of the year to finish it, so we'll talk about that later. Next was Valley Verified. I had zero expectations going into this, and I really liked it. It felt like a very entertaining and addictive TV show, very bingeable. The type you keep clicking next episode on, except over here is next chapter. I really like the friendships in this book, her old friends and her new friends that she made, because she switched careers from fashion industry to tech world in Silicon Valley. And also the relationship between her and her 3 male coworkers kind of reminded me of New Girl, the dynamics between her and her roommates there. But something that threw me off was the way she almost immediately had some really deep conversations with people she just met. I was like, are you sure you guys haven't met before? I'm really looking forward to reading more of Kyla's books, and this was a 5 stars. Next, I read K-Pop Revolution, which is the second book of K-Pop Confidential. I just fell in love with the first book after reading it. It was just so good, so funny, so bingeable. It was just like a perfect young adult book, in my opinion. And why is reading about K-pop so fun? So then I picked up the second book. Surprisingly, this was even better than the first book. I thought nothing could top that. When I was reading this, I was also really in the mood to read a book about famous people, and this delivered on that for sure, and it was just so easy to binge. 100% 5 stars. Next, I read for the first time The Hunger Games, and I did watch the movie before this a few years ago, I think when I was 11 or 12, and I don't really remember that much about the movie, but basically I knew the gist of it. I knew what was gonna happen in this book, who was gonna die, and what was gonna pretty much happen. But even knowing that, the gist of it, I still enjoy this book so much, and that just screams good book to me. When you know what's gonna happen and you still enjoy it so much. This was really fun. It was a 5 stars, and I wrote that it is really fun to read about Katniss hunting, walking and exploring, managing her supplies when she's in the Hunger Games. That was just those little details, the survival, the process. It was so fun to read about. Maybe because I also adore survival shows. Me and my family's favorite survival show is Outlast, where they survive in Alaska, and just so fun to watch. They have like their own teams, how they're managing supplies, making alliances with other teams. So I kind of want to read more books on the survival aspects. Next, I picked up Isla and the Happily Ever After. It's the 3rd book in the Anna of the French Kiss series. I felt like reading something chill, and I thought this would be perfect, but there was just simply too much romance. This is why I prefer romance as a subplot, not the main plot, even though I do like it as a main plot too, but it has to be done well, you know? Over here it was not done well in my opinion. It just felt like 2 hormonal teenagers think with their hormones and not their brains, and that was not fun to read for me, so I did not finish this. It's a DNF for me. I did not like. I think this is definitely the worst book in the Anna and French Kiss series. The first book was the best, second book was like okay, kind of bad, and this one was just like I'm not even gonna finish it. But I think I got through like for sure at least 100 pages in. Next, we continued the Hunger Games series, and I read Catching Fire. It started off really slow and dragging, and I was kind of bored until things finally picked up, and then from then on it was pretty fun and I liked it, but there were some parts that made me uncomfortable. I forgot what those parts are, but I do remember feeling uncomfortable at some parts of this book, and that's what I also wrote in my Goodreads review. And overall I liked it less than the first book, but I did like some of the new characters that were introduced, and I gave this a 3.5 stars. And then I read the last book of the series, Mockingjay, and this started off a little slow and boring too, but I was expecting for it to kick off later, get fun, like the second book did, but no. As I wrote in my journal, this did not kick off, it did not even step off. This book quite literally sucked. I give this a 2 stars on Goodreads. I think I agree with that rating. If anything, it should be lower, not higher. But yeah, I feel like the first book of the series is the best, then the second, then whatever this is. Next I read You Have a Match, back into the romance contemporary genre. I thought the characters were pretty well developed. I like the characters, their dynamics, humor, and it reminded me a little bit of The Parent Trap because it's about twins that meet up at summer camp, and I wanted more of the summer camp, and despite the whole book being set there, we didn't really get much of it. They only showed one camper activity, and then the rest they just talked about like, oh yeah, we just finished kayaking, okay, let's go eat dinner. A few hours later, okay, we just finished doing this thing, but they didn't tell us how they did it. I want to know, like, and it felt a little repetitive in what they were doing. Mostly what they were showing them doing was eating in the dining hall, walking around the paths on the camp, or walking around in the woods. I was glad that the plot wasn't anything too dramatic because I like more chill, low-key books like this, but this still felt a little too underwhelming. But overall, it's a cute, lighthearted read. I feel like the humor, dialogue, and banter is what carried me through this book, but it's not the most memorable. I gave this a 3.5 stars. Next I read Oh My God. This is an early 2000s books, and you can really tell that it was made for the earlier 2000s girls. She basically goes to the school for Greek children descendants, and there was just a lot of cliches, cliques, but it was fun and nostalgic to read, and really funny. I really liked our main character. She had some of the best lines ever. It wasn't great plot-wise, and the romance was kind of lacking. Like, it could have had some more build-up, some more chemistry, but this is good for the funsies and vibes of it. I give this, I think, a 3.25 stars. Next I read Sun-Kissed. I did not expect this to be this good. First thing I wrote in my reading journal was Holy Macaroni. I loved it, didn't expect to love it this much, and didn't expect to connect with it so much. This book felt very well formulated, and it just felt so full and alive. The characters were very well developed. I was delighted by all of their relationships and dynamics, and I thought it was really cute how our main character Avery, who's a guest at this vacation lodge place, becomes such close friends with all the staff members. The main character annoyed me at times, the things she did or acted the way she did, but that was part of her character development. She had to realize some things about herself and change, so it's okay. And I think the romance was amazing too in this. It was very well written, the build-up, the raw, vulnerable moments, sticking up for each other, and enjoying and spending time with each other, and looking forward to the next time. Overall, I think this is an amazing, amazing, amazing summer book. 5 stars. And I wrote so much about this while I was reading it. Next was Rebel with a Donut. I feel like I was way too nice for it on my Goodreads review. I said it's a good, chill, slow, lazy summer kind of book, but I feel like it was a little too slow and lazy and chill. I was getting really bored with this. It felt very repetitive. Like, there were a lot of scenes that just could have been cut. We don't need to know every single detail of their day. I had given this a 3 stars, but honestly, I think I'll lower it to a 2.5. Next was I Hope This Doesn't Find You by Anne Liang. This was my second book from her. I feel like I said so many good things about it in my Goodreads review, even though now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure about that. It was really good. I feel like her stories are very well planned out and written, and they're very bingeable. Like, I finished this so fast. So since my Goodreads says 5 stars, that's how I felt when I finished it. I really liked it, so I'll keep it at that. In the summertime, I got a little cold, and I don't know what it was, but I just did not want to read fiction anymore. Fiction, just the sound of that just made me want to barf, but I did want to read, and the only thing that sounded good was nonfiction. And so I bought this book, 24 Hours in Ancient Rome. It sounded really fun. You spend 24 hours in Rome. Each hour is about a different character that lived back then. The characters are fake, but what they do and their jobs in Rome are not fake. It's like a historical nonfiction. This is quite interesting, but some of the characters, reading about them was a little bit boring, so I just like skimmed through those parts. Did not finish this. I read basically a little bit over 100 pages and I put it down, so maybe I'll finish it in 2025, I don't know. But I was still in the nonfiction mood, so the next book I picked up was Reef Life, and this I did enjoy. I think I read like half of this book when I started it, something like that, but then I like put it down to read other books and then finished this at the end of December to finish it for 2024. I thought this was really fun. We read about the author and his basically life story of becoming a marine biologist, his adventures and experiences, and I learned so much. I love expanding my knowledge like this. I think I said those exact words in my book tag. Just some parts at the end especially seemed repeated way too many times. Like he was trying to get the point across, so that made me feel more bored and put it down more often. And also sometimes there are very detailed explanations of fish, which I just kind of skipped too because I don't care too much about how long this fish was and how many lines it had in it. Next, back to middle grade. This is like a collection of 4 books in the series, The Cupcake Diaries. I really loved this when I was little, and I reread this whole book multiple times before when I was little. I decided to reread again the first book in this, which is Katie and the Cupcake Cure, but I'm not going to rate it because obviously I'm going to enjoy it less now than I did when I read it originally. Very sweet and fun middle grade series. Next, I read The Firefly Summer. This is also my sister's book. It reminded me a lot of me and my siblings. I want to say childhood, but I feel like I'm still in my childhood. Basically how they play outside, make up their own games, do whatever they want, and just have a natural, simple, fun summer. I thought the characters were also written very well, and I loved their friendships. I also really hope they do a book 2 of this, because there's something that happens at the end which would make a perfect book 2. And I gave this a 4.75 stars. Next, I read Air Awakens. This has been on my physical TBR for an extremely long time, and I finally picked it up. I didn't have many expectations when I went into it, but I loved it. It was very comforting, cozy, and fun. If I could describe this in only one little phrase, I would say night breeze. It was fast-paced and very easily bingeable. I loved the vibes of this fantasy book. And at first, our main character, Vala, seemed very unassuming, just like a nice little meek, timid girl. So I didn't think too much about her, but then she pleasantly surprised me with some of the things she said. She definitely has a sarcastic, witty side. She said so many things that had me be like, yes! But I feel like the romance developed a tad too quickly in this. I didn't really feel the chemistry, and on Goodreads I rated this a 4.25 stars. Next, I read another cozy fantasy, and that was The Spell Shop. This was so good. It was the perfect cozy fantasy. It had all those awesome vibes. I feel like this was Boxcar Children and Stardew Valley combined. Started a new life, was fixing up her cottage and helping out the villagers and doing magic, and it was also so funny. There were so many funny parts. This was a 5 stars, and I really liked how nothing too dramatic happened in this. Not everything needs to be super dramatic or traumatic or sad for the characters, and not that there was nothing happening in this book. There was a plot and there was some stuff happening, and there was still high enough stakes to make me care about the plot. It's getting kind of dark. I'm getting kind of tired of talking, but anyways, next I read ASAP. This is book 2 of XOXO, which is a series about K-pop. This book is about 2 different characters, like their friends, and I love this. I really enjoyed reading about these 2 characters. I think I enjoyed reading about them even more than the first book. Maybe because in that book only her boyfriend is in the K-pop industry, not her. But over here both of them are working in the K-pop industry. Him as an idol, her as, I don't want to spoil, but she does work in it. I think this is a 4.5 stars, and I hope that the author writes more books about this world because there's still 2 other characters that could have their own stories. So I'm really excited to see if she does end up doing that. Next, I read Fire Falling, book 2 of Air Awakens, and I like this less than Air Awakens. It started off slow and stretched out and kind of continued like that almost through the whole entire book, so nothing really was happening through a lot of this book until it picked up at the end. But what I did like about this is that the romance felt so much better. Unlike the first one where I said that I wish there was more development and more chemistry, I feel like we got that in this book. So this kind of felt like a bridge book, like between this and the next book maybe. I haven't read the next book yet, which is this, so we'll see how that goes. And was this really just a bridge between the 2 novels? This was a 3 stars. Also, there was a lot of scenes in this where it was her dreams, and I hate dream scenes. They're just so boring to read about most of the time, and especially in here, I was just like skimming through them. I thought they were useless until at the end there was like a plot twist involving them, and I was like, oh, that's what they were for. Okay. But I like skipped most of them, so the plot twist didn't feel that big to me. Next, I read this, another middle grade book, Best Friends Until Someone Better Comes Along. That sounds dramatic, I know, but there's actually nothing like that in here. I don't think so. There's no one better that came along, so I'm a little bit confused why it's titled that. This was also unique and different because we followed the POV of a mean girl and kind of her development, how she stops being a mean girl. I also haven't added to my mixed book collection in a long hot minute. This was a 3.5 stars. Next, I read Pride and Prejudice. I talked about this a lot in my book tag, so I'm not going to go too deep into it over here, but I was surprised because I liked this more than I was expecting to, and I found it very comforting and enjoyable, and I was honestly very interested in these these characters and their stories. Also loved them like gathering at balls and meetings and tea times. Some people I heard found that boring. They said this book is just basically people going to each other's houses. I guess I can see where they're coming from, but I think there's more to this book than just that. So this was a 4 stars. And then after I finished this, I wanted immediately to read more of Jane Austen. So I got Sense and Sensibility. This is the first novel Jane Austen ever published, and you can tell it had similar vibes, I guess, to Pride and Prejudice, but with this there was actually pretty much nothing happening. It really was just people going to each other's houses, and there was less settings. Like, they just kept going to the same house mostly all the time, and then a different house towards the end. While in Pride and Prejudice, there was more than that. There was like a lot of places they went to. So I felt like this was pretty boring, the story, and pretty much nothing was happening. The ending was not that good either, and it didn't leave me feeling satisfied. So this was like a 2.5 stars. And now the last book I read in 2024, we're coming back to this, which I started earlier in the year, but then put it down around page 60 and then picked it up at the end of the year again and finished it. I actually finished most of it in January already. So does this count as a 2025 read? Because I've honestly read most of this book in 2025, but might as well tell you guys how I liked it. I really liked reading about Rebecca's childhood adventures, and I think that this was written before Anne of Green Gables, and then Anne of Green Gables was written after this, and it's super similar between them. Like, there's lots of similarities, but a lot of people say that Anne of Green Gables is loads better, but I have not read it. I only read like simplified children's versions of Anne of Green Gables before, but I do want to read the real thing. But even with those children's versions of Anne of Green Gables, I could tell the similarities between these two, but I did really enjoy this. Maybe once I read Anne of Green Gables, I'll enjoy that more. This was quite nice. I think I liked the beginning of this more, like the first middle, where it was just her sweet adventures, daily life in the small village, and then towards the end it started feeling a little more bittersweet because Rebecca was growing up, and also towards the end there were longer time jumps, which made it feel even more bittersweet because she was growing up a lot faster this way, while in the first half it was just like her everyday adventures. But there were some really good quotes in the thought-provoking lines. So even though this is considered a children's classic, I feel like readers that are a bit older would connect to it even more and enjoy it and really understand it more. So I did like this. I think this is a 3.75. It's hard. There was also a character in this that I didn't like, Mr. Adam Ladd. I found his friendship with Rebecca like a little weird, but I did really like the Cobbs. And that is all of the books that I read this year. We have these little stacks, and my head kind of hurts from talking so much, and it's also getting so dark outside. It's literally only like 5, but you know, at least winter solstice has passed. That means the longest night has passed. Now the days are growing longer and the nights are growing shorter, so yay! Subscribe, follow my social medias, and my Goodreads will be linked down below too. Like this video if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Also, comment down below what your favorite books of 2024 were. Very curious. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Subscribe, follow my social medias and Goodreads. Bye!